This week's episode is brought to you in partnership with Zero Procure, who are here to make procurement simple, offering great value and quality for products and services, all for zero cost. And what business wouldn't want that? I am delighted that their support will now help keep this show accessible and free to listen to wherever you access your podcasts. Please get in touch with them for a chat. Just click on their link in the show notes or visit their site at zeroprocure.com/podcast. Welcome to Hospitality Meets with me, Phil Street, where each week we take a light-hearted look into the stories and individuals that make up the wonderful world of hospitality. Today's guest is Simon Maguire, ex-senior level hotelier and now performance coach with Westpeak. Coming up on today's show, Simon gets right on message.
There is not a better career than hospitality.
Phil makes a global request. Yeah, so everybody just keep being great to everyone and we'll fix everything. And Simon offers up a huge reveal on great leadership.
If anybody out there wants my opinion on how to be a great leader, this is it summed up for me in a very short sentence.
All that and so much more as Simon chats us through his brilliant career so far. From the outside looking in, Simon has had a career that has just been one constant upwards trajectory. But underneath that, he's had to work through his own adversity and has come out a much stronger person and leader, which he talks about openly. As a result, this is a chat rammed full of amazing life lessons, and a huge thank you to him for being so open. Don't forget to give us a like and a subscribe wherever you consume your podcasts. Enjoy. And a huge Hospitality Meets welcome to Simon Maguire. How are you?
I'm great, Phil. Thanks very much for having me on.
You're very, very welcome. Where do we find you today?
I'm at home in Salisbury. So, nice to be at home on a Friday after a week of travel mentalness, been up to London and Bournemouth and all sorts this week. So, yeah, it's nice to be back home.
Yeah, well, I saw a post of yours on LinkedIn this morning around the fact that you'd had a what looked like, certainly from the outside looking in, a really good week.
Yeah, no, it's been a great week. I've had quite a big career change, I guess, after 20 years kind of in the thick of hospitality. It's a bit of a change of shift. So when you have a really good week where you start to get into the rhythm of a new role, it's really pleasing. So it takes a little while to adapt, but once you get there, it's all good.
Yeah. So what is it that you? Well, actually, just tell the world who you are and what it is that you are now currently doing.
Yeah, so Simon, I live down in Salisbury, and I guess for the last 20 years, or it's actually 25 years, because I started when I was 12 years old or 13 years old, been working kind of full stop in hospitality. But last November, I made a bit of a jump into performance development and working with a company now called Westpeak. But really, we're trying to work with companies, I like to say, to fine-tune their performance. They're normally pretty strong performing companies that we tend to work with, but we're a bit like that kind of elite coach with an athlete, just trying to fine-tune that performance.
Great stuff. Well, we will absolutely get into that at some point down the line, but you alluded to the fact that you've been in this industry since you were a wee lad. So take us all the way back to the beginning. How did you get into the industry in the first place?
So I got into the industry through a friend. My best friend got a job down at the local. It was kind of a sort of pub stroke tea room, and he was washing the dishes. And he said to me, why don't you come along and they've got space for another pair of hands on a Saturday and Sunday afternoon. So I did. He called in sick for that shift. So when there was supposed to be two, it was just me on my own on my first shift.
Right.
Busy
Welcome to hospitality.
Welcome to hospitality. So it was a busy shift. And a funny story is that I got halfway through that shift and I hated it. I hated every minute of it. And I remember the chef, the sort of head chef at the time, shouting at me, and he needed the plates back quicker. And I decided I just walked out. Thought I'm not up to this. And the place was about 2 minutes away from my house. So I walked home and my dad was there and he said, "You're home a lot earlier than I was expecting." I said, "Yeah, no, it wasn't for me. I walked out." And he marched me back down there. I'd only been gone about 10 minutes, so it looked like I'd gone for a cigarette break. He marched me back down there and told me to finish what I'd started. And by the end of my shift, I kind of got on and started to enjoy it. And I think the fact that I came back and the fact that I turned up the next day, I seemed to win the respect. Maybe no one else did turn up the next day. And and I kind of cracked on from there really, and never looked back.
Yeah, that sounds like an amazing place to work. But I tell you what, there's a sliding doors moment for you right away, right? I mean, what if you'd have gone home and your dad had gone, oh well, there'll be other jobs, son. Don't worry.
Yeah, who knows? Definitely a sliding doors moment. And I kind of then went to university and carried on working my summers and Christmases. I'd moved to a hotel which is now part of Alexander Hotels. It's called Barnet Hill, but back then it was a conference centre. And I worked in the housekeeping department throughout my summers and all of that for about 3 years. And then I just loved it. I just loved the atmosphere and the fact that you were a team, the fact that you could make an impact no matter what job you did, the fact that you could interact with the customers. I was literally addicted. And as soon as I finished university, I applied for a management training role with Firmdale Hotels in central London.
Right. Okay. So here we are. Well, that's a few years on from that first shift, whereby your words, you hated it. When did it start to become less about hate and more about actually this is actually something that I think I could get into?
Yeah, I think it was just as you get into it and you start to form relationships with people and you have managers who really kind of care about you and kind of show you the way and take the time to train you and develop you. I think it just became I got better at it. I think that was important. I felt like I was delivering some value not only to the business but to the customers and to my teammates. And you didn't want to let people down. You didn't want to let your team down. And so you kind of felt part of something and you felt part of delivering a really great guest experience. And so I think that's what grew on me. And I really just learned to love the buzz of it.
Yeah, I do know. I know you're a guy that's heavily into his sport. I know that that's also not always been the case, and we'll definitely talk about that at some point. But and actually, like you, my story is much the same in terms of well, in as much as I, my mum and dad had a hotel, and I'd kind of naturally worked for them in that process. But actually, when I was a teenager, I hated the work, and I've been quite open about that actually on this podcast. But I kind of now look at that like it's the first time that you decide that you're going to take on, that you're going to become a runner. And the vast majority of people, when they get into running, hate it. And I was no different. But actually, it's exactly the same in your career. If you persevere and you break through that hate period, on the backside of that is, just the most glorious thing. And it's exactly the same in your career. Actually, that's where all the gold is when it comes to your career, is that moment where you break through the stuff that you just can't feel like is part of you or connected to you. But then actually, if you just keep pushing through, there's some wonderful, wonderful moments ahead of you.
Yeah, and I was incredibly lucky when I went on to work for Firmdale. I was incredibly lucky to be in an environment of high growth. They were opening hotels quite rapidly. They had a fantastic HR team, a chap called Mike Williams and a lady called Mari.
Legendary.
Yeah, and they were just developing, getting the absolute best out of people. And so you felt I was getting promoted at a far faster rate than any of my school friends in other jobs, whether they were engineers or solicitors. And I felt like, this was definitely for me.
Yeah. So what era are we in now? If you don't mind, this will probably age you, I'm sure. But when did you join Ferndale?
So that's a good question. About 2001, I think.
Right.
So Firmdale was being run by a managing director at the time called Carrie Wicks, who
Also
was
legendary.
yes, absolutely fantastic. A little bit scary. I'm still in touch with her, so I hope she won't mind me saying that. But she got the absolute best results out of people. She was very fair. She was very strong, and she had fantastic attention to detail. So as a team, you had to be on the ball, and we learned a lot from her. I think that's for sure, and I still regard her as one of the very best.
Yeah, and I suppose as well when you're kind of in your career infancy there and you're learning your way, and actually maybe at this point as well, which part of the business sings to you the most, and this is when you're forming your opinion, I suppose, of what you actually want to become in your career.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was nice for me to work for Ferndale because you were able to try all different aspects. So I worked in reservations, I worked in the kitchen, I worked in housekeeping. But what I really fell in love with was front office because I felt that that was the best way to impact a guest stay. I felt like you were really the brain of the operation and you were connected to everything that was going on, whether it was food and beverage or housekeeping. So it was a real central focal point, and I felt like I could learn the most there, not only about the business, but the customers. And so I just really developed through there. I did the opening of the Soho Hotel as reception manager. That was a great experience to be part of an opening team of quite a big London hotel, and then went on to be deputy general manager at the Covent Garden Hotel for many years, which I really enjoyed as well.
Right, yeah. So how long were you with Ferndale in total?
In total, I was with Firmdale for just under 10 years, about 9 years, I think. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And to be clear, this is not a job interview, so we don't go fact checking this stuff. So you're safe. But yeah, no. Just to get a sense of, I suppose, yeah, you would have, I assume, experienced an awful lot of development in that time.
Yeah, I mean, we were, the training and the development was weekly. We were doing courses. We were doing, they were just brilliant at it. Whether it was in house or bringing people in from external, they were just absolutely brilliant. And you were never in a job for too long. You never had an opportunity to get bored. Before you knew it, you were promoted again. So
Right.
it was a great culture, and people were getting, because there were hotels opening, people were getting pushed up the chain very, very quickly, and that gave a great atmosphere and a great culture.
Yeah. I think that there's a balance to be had there, isn't there, around like it's great to be in an environment where you can get promoted quickly, but you've got to have the support network around you in order to allow you to make that step up, because you can very quickly find yourself out of your depth. And if you don't if you're not, I suppose, given the tools to be able to fail and make mistakes and just know that people are there to pick you up, not to pull you down, like that's massively important when you're in a fast growth stage.
Yeah, and we see it a lot now at West Peak. We deal with quite a lot of companies that are in quite high growth states, and actually that's kind of when we're brought in, because it's trying to develop those leaders as fast as possible and give them some of the tools that you don't necessarily learn on the shop floor. And I think, even throughout my career, once I then moved on into other companies, some of that formal stuff and some of that kind of classroom stuff proved hugely beneficial for me, that perhaps if I hadn't been with Firmdale, I might not have been exposed to. So I feel very fortunate about that.
Well, I mean, as I said, formative part of your career, I suppose. But what happened next? Where did you head after that?
So after that I went to Jersey for 2 years to run a hotel called the Atlantic Hotel as my first general manager's role.
Right.
And I really enjoyed that, and I was having a great time. And I got a phone call from Mike Williams, who had then left Firmdale and joined a group called Hotel Divan, which was at the time an emerging boutique brand similar to, I'd call them Firmdale out of town,
Right.
slightly
Yeah.
slightly more casual, but they had a great concept with the sommelier and, really strong head chefs who were using local supply chains. And it was an incredible brand. And I knew of them and I wanted to work for them. So when Mike called me, I was over for the interview pretty quickly, and I was lucky enough to get a role as general manager of Hotel Divan Tunbridge Wells. At that time, it was very rare for them to bring a general manager in from outside the business. They tended to promote within. So I felt quite privileged to have got in there. And I then went on to manage, I called it the Hotel Divan flagship. Some people would disagree, but it was Brighton, which was really, really busy. 55 bedrooms, I think it was, and it was absolutely packed. 58 bedrooms, absolutely packed all the time. So that was a great opportunity. And then I went on to be regional manager for them, and I looked after Brighton, Tunbridge Wells, and Poole.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, developing through, and also, I mean, this company has got a lot to answer for actually when it comes to this podcast. There's so many people that I've interviewed who've had a time with Hotel de Van or Malmaison. They were at their pinnacle. They were really, I mean, they were a groundbreaking brand, weren't they? Really, in terms of what they were doing and what they were achieving in that space.
Yeah, and again, it was very. I have to say, it was very similar to Firmdale. It was like going from one high growth business to another. Really, they were in that great state where they were people were being promoted across different hotels. There was new hotels opening all the time. There was a real buzz around the brand. So I was just, I guess, lucky on both occasions to land within a business that was in a really great shape at the time. And I look back at that part of my career and just think I was really blessed because I still am in touch with a lot of people from that time.
Yeah, you used the word lucky there, but there's no luck without graft and talent. So, and especially graft, I think it's that old Gary Player one, isn't it? The harder I work, the luckier I get. That's the one.
There was a lot of graft. There was a lot of graft, but
Yeah,
fun graft.
but absolutely. I mean, that's when you get that balance right. Like it's just a really infectious place to be, isn't it?
Yeah, and it was just a brilliant culture that you just wanted to perform. You just wanted to have the guests were loving it. You actually loved being there because it was a brand that I associated how I would like to spend my own time, and so it was an easy fit to be there and meet so many contacts,
Yeah.
so many of which I'm still in touch with today.
Yeah, and again, you've hit another nail on the head. It's much easier to commit yourself to the graft when you just really get what it's just you fit like a glove with each other. It's just so much easier to give everything that you've got for it, isn't it?
Yeah, and again, sort of harking back onto to what we do now, you see it in the businesses that have great cultures that really invest in their people. That there's no sort of clock watching environment or anything like that. People are genuinely working because they enjoy it, and that there's a whole different atmosphere in businesses that where people work where they enjoy it because they do it for the love, not just for um, the job.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're now, how many years would you have been in your hotel career at this point as a regional? Well, and how long would you have been in hospitality, I suppose, and to get to that point?
Yeah, so nearly 13, 14 years.
Right.
And I left Hotel Divan just within a couple of months of them sort of selling. The group sold. And at that point, the managing director of Hotel Divan had moved on to a new group called Harbour Hotels, which was in its infancy.
Yeah.
And I was called by Mike Warren, who is still MD at Harbour Hotels. And he said to me that there was an exciting journey about to take place at Harbour Hotels of high growth. And it
Well, here
sounded
we are
like,
again.
and it sounded like a great opportunity. So we had a couple of coffees, and I couldn't resist.
Yeah. So, okay, we're establishing here that that you enjoy a fast-paced, high-growth business. Well,
Yes.
certainly at that point in your life, you did. I'm sure we'll get on to what you like now, but yeah, why do you think that is? I mean, why do you think that just was something that seemed to appeal?
I think it probably appealed, and it was probably also my strength. So I think I'm quite adaptable. I think I found it easy to jump from not from one job to the next, but I found it easy to kind of multitask. I found it easy to move from one hotel to the other and evaluate things. And I also love the buzz of opening hotels, of bringing teams together, that kind of forming, storming, norming, performing stages, and watching that and seeing how teams come together. I absolutely love kind of breathing life into people and into teams. and you get to do that very regularly in groups that are growing fast. So it kind of worked. I was good at it. I also enjoyed it.
Brilliant. Well, I mean, so we're at Harbour. Tell us about your Harbour journey.
Yeah, so Harbour was incredibly exciting. I think when I joined the brand, they had 5 hotels, and I worked with them again just under 5 years, about 4.5 years, I think it was. And by the time I left, we had 16 properties.
Wow.
So, and really, I suppose my key responsibility was opening those new properties, or if they were not a new opening but a turnaround of another brand from another brand into a harbour. So that was incredibly exciting. I would say working in kind of it was incredibly high octane, and I would say that's where probably I had a young family, and probably my work life balance started to get seriously out of kilter. And it was a really, I enjoyed it, but it was an incredibly tough time, and it took its toll on my health. I put on a lot of weight. I really struggled with drink, painkillers. So it was,
Crikey.
whilst it was still a good experience, and I wouldn't change it for anything, I did find myself particularly towards the end of that, really struggling with, anxiety and things like that. So it wasn't a bad experience, and I don't want to put those issues down to any particular individual or anything like that. It was purely, I think, years of running at that speed had taken its toll.
Yeah, I've had conversations on and off microphone with people who've been in scenarios like this before, and a lot of the time I hear in situations like that, of course, when you have that kind of awakening that something's not right, you can actually look at that as actually a positive experience, if that makes any kind of sense at all. Because actually, without you, I suppose, not looking after yourself, you don't then have the realizations that, hey, look, I'm not looking after myself here, and I need to make a change to do something about this.
Yeah, and I noticed, it was whilst I was at Harbour, and whether it was a photo taken with, I had my photo taken with someone who I really admire, Freddie Flintoff, the England cricketer, and I looked terrible in the photo. I've still got it, and I looked absolutely terrible, and I thought, jeepers, you need to do something about your health. But a few other people had mentioned something to me as well, and it was just time to kind of throw myself into it and make sure I protected my health for the next however many decades that I was going to be around, because it wasn't going in the right way, and it was leading to feelings of depression and that. So I ended up leaving Harbour, but I already had by the time I was leaving Harbour, I'd already started that journey of getting a grip on that situation.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how did you turn the tide, basically, and
Yeah.
I suppose start regaining a bit of control on that.
So I think that's an interesting one for me. I think I was fairly fortunate in the fact that it kind of was just like a light bulb moment and a bit of a flick of the switch. And I started boxing, which was really, really good for me. And the boxing gym I was going to early in the morning, Monday to Friday, if you turned up, I think having had a hangover, it wasn't a pleasant experience.
Yeah, no way. Who'd have
Um,
thought?
so I quickly, that kind of really helped me to stop drinking, having that. And slowly but surely, I think momentum is a really interesting thing. Whether you have momentum in a negative sense or a positive sense, even if it's 1% momentum, then you can move things in the right direction. And so many things, whether it was the painkillers, whether it was the mood, whether it was the weight, whether it was the alcohol, everything started to move in the right direction because of momentum. And just kept on layering 1% at a time, and I'm still on that journey. It's still 1% at a time, and 4 years later, I'm in the best shape of my life. And momentum is a real powerful thing, but it's also a powerful thing negatively.
Yeah.
And we forget that actually a lot of people, we think to ourselves, oh, well, why are they that way? Or why are they overweight? Or why haven't they got themselves out of this situation? And actually, to turn the tide when things have got a strong negative momentum is extremely difficult as well. So I think momentum is a huge word for me.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more. I mean, it's a word that's used a lot in business and sport, but not so much in personal life. I don't think. I mean, certainly I have my head in quite a lot of books around personal development and podcasts, and I don't hear about momentum in a personal sense. But actually, if you think about it, once you've got the momentum in your personal life, everything else will start to be part of that momentum, I would imagine.
Yeah, and that's really what happened. As I said, towards the end of my Harbour journey, I really started to get into good shape. I then was able to secure a role as managing director at Luxury Family Hotels, which was a huge job for me. I was really proud to take on that role, and I did that role for 4 years through COVID. And the COVID situation, really proved to me that momentum was taking me in the right direction. I was able to manage, I would say, at the top of my game through that period. Obviously I made mistakes, but I really learned about leadership in throughout COVID, and really started to develop a huge passion for empowering others, for getting the best out of other people. And I saw hospitality at its very best during those 4 years as MD of Luxury Family. I saw people work for one another. I saw great examples of people. We were closing hotels and opening hotels within a matter of weeks. We were doing
Yeah,
stuff that I opened more hotels and closed more hotels in the 3 years at Luxury Family than I did in the
yeah.
20 years of my career. It was a really difficult time for everyone, but the attitude, the perseverance, the resilience of not just the people at Luxury Family, but the people across the industry was phenomenal. And I felt incredibly proud to lead a company, but incredibly proud to be I don't know what the word for us is, it a hospitalitarian?
Something like that. Yeah, that'll do. I've had that a couple of times on here. That's yeah. That period was. Do you know? ah, This is maybe me being incredibly naively positive, but I think COVID was an essential part of life. Like, as in, in terms of it gave everybody a moment to check themselves and check on those who are close to you, and check, am I taking my career in the right direction, and check all of these things that you, when you're on the hamster wheel, you just don't necessarily get the breathing space to do that. And I think a lot of, certainly from my conversations over the last couple of years of doing this show, the unity in the industry, I think, has never been stronger. It's almost like now the industry is coming together to fight the issues that come our way, rather than this perhaps a siloed approach that had happened historically. We'll never be perfect at that, but certainly the willingness to join together and figure out how we get round and over barriers, is just it's there for all to see now.
I 100% agree. I've seen a real shift post COVID of how the hospitality industry is working together on so many issues, supporting each other. And it's not just, hospitality businesses, it's the businesses that surround that, whether it's the some of the firms that we were partnered with as we went through COVID, the way they responded. The team at I'll always be grateful for the team at, for example, at Harry, the way they continued to put on events for employees, or, whoever it was. There were so many companies who stood up and did things, even if it wasn't for their own people. And I think, we should all be really grateful for the efforts that so many put in during that time.
Totally. There's a couple of things I'd like to unpack from the last couple of moments of your career. It's just a question came into my head when you were talking about your, I suppose the place when you hit the bottom, if you like, and it was really just centered around, if there's somebody out there who's listening to this who's experiencing, a similar part of their life that maybe they're aware that they're not in a good place either mentally, physically, or both, or whatever. What would you say to them as a kind of a first step to be able to, I suppose, start turning that momentum back in their favor?
Yeah, I think sharing it with somebody, and I shared it with people who were very close to me. Some people might not feel as comfortable about doing that, and there are other people that you can share with, be it Hospitality Action. I know the Burnt Chef project also has a fantastic support line. So I think as soon as I started, it sounds corny, but as soon as I shared it with someone, I felt I'd got rid of 50% of the problem. I'd
Right.
also made it, I'd made it their problem as
Right.
well. So and I think we can be, when we're talking to ourselves in our own heads, we can be pretty nasty to ourselves. We can be pretty abusive to ourselves. And I think that doesn't necessarily help that momentum. When we share it with someone else, they can be very kind and they can talk to us in a really positive way and say, look, this is where you are now. That's okay. And there's other people in that position, but you can also make a change and you can also shift the dial. And I think that probably is the biggest thing, is get it off your chest, because you might think you've got it off your chest, but you can never really kind of talk enough.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of pride involved in moments like this, isn't there? In terms of the you're actually, if you think about it, you've maybe gotten yourself into a situation like this not just because of your own things, but stuff that's going on around you and all of that just builds up over time. And sometimes you just have to accept that you don't have the tools within yourself to help yourself get to where you need to be. Everybody talks about that moment of asking for help. It's a big step to take, but yeah, as you say, I mean, just share it with somebody that you care about, or share it with somebody completely anonymously, as you say. Get on one of the lines that exist out there. It'll probably be the best thing you ever do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Or if there's anybody out there listening and they need to talk, my LinkedIn is always available, and very happy to talk to anyone.
Yeah, brilliant. I'll park that section because actually, this podcast is not generally a self-help podcast, but
Yeah.
anyway, I think a very important part of your journey. It has formed who you've become today. I think there's no question about that. Certainly, from you're a wonderfully positive individual now, and not that I'm saying you weren't before, because I didn't really know you before, but in terms of what I see, the stuff that you post now is, it's uplifting and it's energizing, and it's what I want to see on a feed. It's the stuff that brings me energy. So I salute you for the monumental change that you've made to become who you are now.
Yeah. And I think, after Luxury Family, I just, I really found my, I suppose, love in supporting other people's journeys. And I loved the leadership element of that. I loved working with my team at Luxury Family and helping to get the very best out of them. And it was a chance meeting with the guys at West Peak who deliver this performance development, that there was an opportunity there to carry on doing that, but to carry on doing it in a really focused way and with more individuals and doing it across different industries. And I love meeting new people. So for me, it was just this fabulous opportunity to carry on doing the bits I absolutely love about hospitality and doing more of them, and doing less of the things, whether it be the finance of a hotel that I probably didn't enjoy as much, or the bits that didn't thrill me on a day-to-day basis. So that's really how I made the move, and just being on being the positive thing I think the self leadership skills that I've had to learn to try and turn this tide and get this momentum going, one of the key elements to that and to keeping myself positive and keeping myself going is to support other people or help other people where possible. And that to me gives me a massive lift and a massive buzz. So that's how I kind of keep myself going on that forward momentum.
Yeah, and at the risk of sounding philosophical and whimsical, I feel like that's all of our duties is to do that. You know, if you're lucky enough to be able to be in a position where you can impart positivity and elevation techniques, you know, then do it. Don't wait for somebody to give you permission. Just do it.
Absolutely.
I think there's science behind it. I think as in it also makes you feel good, right? Because I think there's a chemical release that takes place if you're being kind or you're doing something good for somebody else, then that actually has a release of, is it serotonin or
Yeah, I've
oxytocin?
certainly felt.
Oxytocin. Yeah,
Yeah.
indeed. Yeah. So everybody just keep being great to everyone, and we'll fix everything. There we
Yeah,
are.
and it's amazing what you can get out of it, you know. So, I mean, that's I'm really excited about an event that we're putting on in September, which is going to be called the Fit for Hospitality 10K in Bournemouth, which really came out of all of that positive thinking. I thought I was really enjoying having an impact on people through the leadership training, and I just felt, what could I do for the hospitality industry that could give back on a bigger scale. And I thought about the idea of this Fit for Hospitality 10K, where we could get as many people as possible running a 10K together. And yeah, and we're nearly there. We've nearly we've got it off the ground, and we've got a date which will be September the 21st of this year, and I'm super excited about it.
Fantastic. Yeah. And is that something that again, is this you kind of exploring your own passions now?
Yes. So I guess through this kind of health journey, I'm now a triathlete. I did an Ironman, which is, I think, regarded as one of the hardest sort of one-day endurance events in the world. So it was quite a journey for me to go from not being able to really get up the stairs without being out of breath to being able to do all of that. And what I noticed in myself was that although it was taking me an hour or 2 hours a day in terms of training, my performance at work and my performance in life went on a massive upscale. And so my thought and my mental health. So really the reason I wanted to do Fit for Hospitality with so many other costs rising in people's lives, to give the opportunity to people who might not be able to afford to pay £50 to enter a 10K or that sort of thing, to have an opportunity to have an event to train for and to run with like-minded hospitality colleagues.
Brilliant. No, I think it's wonderful. And as you say, this is a byproduct of exercise, right? I mean, ultimately, I mean, we're talking about you've taken yourself up into the stratosphere of exercise now. But actually, you know, we've another thing that we've spoken about many times on this show is when you've got a positive routine that involves exercise, it's generally going to lift your performance in other areas of your life.
Yeah, and I think my wife will definitely tell you that I'm a much nicer person after I've been for a very long run. It seems to wash away a lot of my stress and
Yeah.
whenever I'm not feeling 100%. So there's definitely some science behind that one. I tend to not know all the sciences. I'm maybe a bit more of one of those ones that reads the motivational wish wash, as other people call it to me. So I love all of that stuff. But I'm really excited about the Fit for Hospitality 10K, because I'm just really looking forward to seeing all those people get over the line. And I think for some people that 10K might be a real great moment in their journey as well.
Fantastic. West Peak. We have,
West Peak.
yeah, we've. Well, actually, before we get to that, we did kind of skirt over luxury family hotels a little bit, that was my fault because I then took you back to your story before. But you were there for actually a good chunk of time, and obviously COVID played its part. But tell us about luxury family hotels, because I think they were fairly. Was this another new fast growth business that was on the horizon for you?
So no, I guess is the answer to that. Luxury Family was a 30-year-old business
Right. Okay.
that had unfortunately not had it had a great start, but due to various sort of troublesome ownership, I'm not talking about people here, I'm talking about kind of the way the finances had been set up. It was underinvested in for a long time.
Right.
And I was lucky enough to join just as we were changing ownership, and it was bought by the group that owns the Grove, which is a fantastic hotel near Watford.
Yeah.
And there was a real mission to move the brand forward. And I joined at a great time, and we went on to refurbish several of the hotels. And we also went on to start development works at Foy Hall, taking that from 36 to 60 bedrooms. We went on to do work at Moonfleet Manor. And what we also did was we massively changed the dial on our people, and that was really fantastic because we saw a huge change there. So, I think we won the KT for Best HR. We won the Springboard Award for Employer of the Year last year, and it was just something we all got behind as a team. And the only way I can say it is we really brought the Firmdale and Hotel Divan culture that
Right.
I'd witnessed into those properties. And
Did you bring in Mike Williams?
I didn't bring in Mike Williams. No, I copied a lot of what he did. And that is the secret, I think, to great leadership. And I'm not saying I'm great at it, but I think the secret, if anybody out there wants my opinion on how to be a great leader, this is it summed up for me in a very short sentence, which is copy the stuff that you see on a day-to-day basis that people do well,
Yeah.
and don't copy the stuff that you see that people do that do badly, and you will become a fantastic leader. And I'm sure there's a much more eloquent way of putting it, but it's always the way I've tried to be. Is I've been lucky enough to work for some phenomenal leaders.
Brilliant.
Phenomenal. But that everyone does things in not such a great way as well. And it's important to recognize that. You don't have to be overly critical, but you can just recognize it and say, maybe that's not how I'm going to act.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I've now got a title for your first ever book, but I'm not gonna divulge it in public because it might actually work. I don't know, but yes. But I mean, that's ultimately how you form your career as well, though, isn't it? Like, you figure out what type of person what type of employee you're going to become by the stuff you see other people doing well and badly, and in your opinion, that's bad. I don't want to do that. So whenever I get into that position, I'm not going to do that. But equally, vice versa, that was awesome what that person did. So whenever I become an MD or a GM or whatever, I'm going to make sure that that's how I lead. Yeah. So I get it. I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
Yeah. So West Peak, we will now talk about that. Yeah. Talk to us about how did that come about? Because it feels like it's a natural progression based around what you've talked about throughout your journey, but equally it does feel like it's a little bit left field.
Yeah.
So yeah, how did that come about?
So we engaged with West Peak at Luxury Family. At the time, it was ran by two chaps and two Bens, and they came and worked with Luxury Family, and I was really impressed with what they delivered, and it just really rang, I guess, a chord with me and the journey I was on, and seeing how they were teaching some of our senior leaders about leadership and about performance development. And so, we had a couple of coffees, and I knew it was what I I wanted to do. And I haven't really looked back. And, I'm in a really, really fortunate position now that I get to go and work with some amazing companies, with young leaders, or certainly leaders early on in their leadership journey predominantly, and get to play a really big part on that. And we take a slightly different view, I would say. It's not, we don't go in and kind of teach like a classroom environment. We look at studies, and we might put some studies on the board, and then we work with the team to kind of talk about those, to kind of critically analyze them, and see what's right for them, and what's not right for them. And it's really inspiring. I mean, this week I was with a recruitment firm and a cybersecurity firm, and just seeing different perspectives on so many things is really exciting. So I'm glad that we've got some hospitality clients on the way as well. So I'm looking forward to getting back into that. But I'm going to have to stop myself from jumping in too deep.
Yeah, indeed. But I think that also what I love about that is that, this podcast is here to promote hospitality as a career. But, I'm not stupid enough to realize that a career doesn't mean necessarily for life. A career can be a portion of your life that leads you into something else. And, and your journey is a wonderful example of that, is that you've taken the skills of what you've learned after years of leadership that you're now able to apply into other sectors as well. And I think that's something that we don't talk about enough as an industry, really, that, this industry prepares you for a lot of things. It gives you the tools and the skills that you probably don't give enough credit for when you're in the middle of, a bad service or whatever bad and good looks like in your business. But if 20 years time, you look at you're now doing something that's cross sector, but you're able to bring the stuff that you've learned from this life in hospitality into different environments.
Yeah, and I would absolutely agree with what you say. And I think for me, and I am biased, but I think there is not a better career than hospitality. And I think that it prepares you, and it toughens. I think toughen might be the wrong word. I know what I'm trying to say, but I think it delivers the most incredible experience for you, and you become so adaptable, you become resilient, you become creative, you just learn so many skills. You learn how to really live in the moment. You learn how to kind of deal with things on the hoof, and you just learn so many skills. The people skills are phenomenal that you learn. And actually, I think people from a hospitality background are the best placed people to go and then work with other groups or work with other verticals, because we learn skills across every spectrum in hospitality. We learn finance skills, we learn marketing skills, we learn customer service skills.
Yeah.
And it prepares you like no other. And I feel really fortunate that I've had that background, and now going into this role at West Peak, I feel I'm in a really good position to support people across many industries. And I think we don't, hospitality is often looked down on, but the truth is it's an absolutely brilliant career, and we're lucky and fortunate to have worked in it, or certainly been a part of it.
Yeah, totally. Here. I've got to put a fanfare over that bit, I think, when I come to edit this. But and you also forgot it teaches you empathy, which I would imagine in your role now is an incredibly critical skill to have when you're going into sectors and businesses that you don't necessarily understand immediately. Empathy can be, the difference between success and failure.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing that we've really tried to do at West Peak, is that we are teaching leaders now in a post-COVID era. And sorry, teaching is the wrong word. I shouldn't say teaching. We are coaching leaders in a post-COVID world, and it's a very different world than it was a few years ago. But still, the basics remain, and that is that good leadership has to be done by people. It can't be done by a computer or a robot. It has to be done by people. And the best leaders are going to be those that are empathetic and can judge the situation, and they will get the best out of people. So empathy is a key skill, and we can always get better at it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Excellent. You just answered one of the questions I would have asked you later, which is give me 3 reasons why somebody should join hospitality. So well done. You're wonderfully prepped on that. But there's another question that I'd like to ask you before I let you go. I am conscious that your dog might join us in 5 minutes. So, and that is funny stories. Any funny stories from your career that you can share with us?
Oh, I've had a few. I'm just wondering what's going to be libelous and not libelous. But so one of the, I suppose, highlights of my career was when I was working at the Covent Garden Hotel, and we used to get to spend a lot of time with quite famous people, I would say.
Yeah.
So I had a couple of really great interactions. So one, it was Helena Christensen, the supermodel. I got to she came back from an event one night, and I got to help her take her necklace off, I think, and she was struggling with her zip at the back of her dress. So that was pretty cool.
Goodness, yeah.
And I got to go and pick up Robbie Coltrane, who was just the most amazing guy who used to stay at the Covent Garden Hotel. And he used to get me to go out and pick up his Chinese order, which was a great order to go and pick up. And he always let me have the prawn crackers, which I'm very thankful for. He didn't seem to be a big fan of the prawn crackers. So, yeah, no, I guess the other one was John Cleese. I think that was his name, the Monty Python guy.
Yeah.
Set off the fire alarm at the Covent Garden Hotel because he was cooking the eggs in his bedroom rather than coming down to the restaurant. I think he had a problem with the price of the eggs down in the restaurant. So he set the fire alarm off for the whole hotel in the middle of central London on a busy Tuesday morning. So, you do get some amazing experiences working in these hotels. So yeah, I think those probably rank as some of my best. I've probably got some others, but I probably have to take those offline.
Yeah. Well, there was one that you wrote down about popping some champagne in somebody's head.
Oh yeah, okay. Well, that was actually pretty much my first day at work for Firmdale Hotels. There was back in the day, and some hotels still do it, but there was kind of this manager's cocktail party that would be held on I think at Firmdale it was a Tuesday evening. So the GM would invite all the guests in house at the time, plus a few sales contacts to come for a drink at 6:30. And I was on my first shift, and I was opening the champagne, and the general manager was there, Paula, and I wasn't very well trained at opening champagne at the time, and I popped a cork, and it smacked her straight in the head. And this was literally, she turned, and this was in front of a lot of people, and she turned, and she was brilliant. She just laughed it off gracefully and came over and kind of cuddled me. She didn't know me from Adam at that point, and she took me aside afterwards at the end, and I thought, this is it. I've done it. I'm being fired. And she was just brilliant. She said, look, don't worry about it. It created a great talking point for the evening. Thank you so much. And then someone else showed me how to open a bottle of champagne properly. And every time I get near to opening anything these days, I always remember that.
You get triggered.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, but that, I mean, beautifully handled by her as well, though, I have to say, because you're already feeling pretty bad in that moment, I would imagine. Like, of all of the people to smack in the face with a cork, that's about as bad as it gets in principle. So, what is the point in making you feel any worse than you already feel yourself in that moment?
Yeah, 100%. No, it was really well handled, and again, something that you would say I stole from that leader in terms of knowledge, rather than not copying it.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you very, very much for sharing your story with us today. I think there's some wonderful, wonderful bits in there for people to take away on their own journey, and wish you well with this next chapter. It sounds really, really interesting. I'll need to grab a coffee with you at some point and talk about it in more depth, because it sounds right up my street. But pardon the pun, actually, there. But if people want to get a hold of you to learn more about you or West Peak or anything that you're up to, what's the best method for them to do that?
Yeah, so on my LinkedIn page, Simon Maguire, I'm pretty active on there, or Simon Maguire at thewestpeak.com. And it would be great to hear from anyone, in a business that's looking to really fine tune that leadership performance.
Great stuff. Thanks so much, Simon.
Thanks for having me, Phil.
You're very, very welcome, and I'll catch you again soon.
Bye now.
Cheers. And there we have it. I hope you agree that Simon's journey is fascinating and inspirational in equal measure. We're so lucky to have people like him in the industry flying the flag. I'll be back next week with more hospitality flag flying, but until then, thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next week.